So, I want to share with you guys a thought. It's a sensitive point, but I think it's very, very important to be clarified. In this week's parsha we have the beginning of the building of the Jewish people. And Klal Yisrael are built primarily on two women, based on coming from two women. That's Rachel and Leah. Even though we know that there's Morimos, Sarah and Rivka, and Bilhah and Zilpah, but we find throughout Tanakh that in truth these two women, Rachel and Leah, were more than just women. They're more than just individual people. So for example, in the book of Ruth, Megillas Rus, so at the end, when Boaz and Rus get married, so the Bezdin, the court, the Jewish people that were at the Chasana, they give Boaz the bracha, which seems to have been the standard bracha at the time, which is that you should be zocha, you should merit to build a family from this woman, like Rachel and Leah, who built the Jewish people. So Rachel and Leah. So in the Star Tradition, we're taught that, again, as I said, Rachel and Leah are more than just two individual women. These two women represent two different modes, two different systems by which Hashem runs the world, by which Hashem governs each and every one of our lives. And just as these two women, in their own personal lives and the life of their children, there was some conflict between them, right? There was some sichsach between Rachel and Leah. And especially Yehuda and Yosef, right, the two main children of Rachel and Leah, there's certainly some conflict. So too, there are these two ways with which Hashem runs the world, and there's conflict between the two of them. And we have to struggle to deal with that. It's like this. What does Rachel mean in terms of how Hashem runs the world? So what do we know about Rachel? The first thing we know about Rachel is that she was beautiful. Yifas Tar v'Yifas Mara. Rachel and everyone in the family of Rachel are always described as being very beautiful and very handsome. Right? Yosef is Yefeitar Vefei Mara. Shaul, for example, the first king of the Jewish people, was coming from that world of Rachel Imenu. Shaul is described as being very handsome, as being head and shoulders above everyone else. What does that mean? What that means is as follows. There's a certain way that Hashem runs the world, which we're familiar with from the time that we're little kids, and it sums up in two words, which is schar v'oinish, reward and punishment. Reward and punishment. What does reward and punishment mean? It means that everything fits in a very, very specific model that makes sense. It makes sense. It means you're a good boy, you got good things. You're not such a good boy, not such good things. There's a certain beauty in that. There's a certain beauty in a very structured organization that makes sense, that each piece fits in its place. Let's say there's certain people that are like into math, that are good at math. Like math people sometimes describe math as beautiful, like a formula that fits in every piece, like it all works out. All the puzzle pieces work out together. There's some beauty in that. Symmetry is beautiful. The beauty of Rachel Imenu means that Hashem runs the world in such a way where there is a system of reward and punishment. And as difficult as sometimes the concept of punishment might be, but there is something settling and at least knowing that what happens is for a reason. So for example, little kids, right? Little kids, by their very nature, feel comfortable and feel secure when they're in a system that fits a formula. So for example, like little kids shows, like videos and stuff, they're very strict with like certain formulas, and every episode will just repeat itself basically over and over again. Kids feel comfortable when there's a box that everything fits into. And even if part of that formula, part of that system is sometimes difficult, but at least it's coming for a reason and it fits. That's schar v'oinish. That's the usual way that we're sort of taught about how Hashem runs the world from the time that we're little kids. And that fits with a little kid perspective. But here's the problem. The problem is as you go through life and you experience life as an adult, very often very often it becomes obvious that there's got to be something more to how Hashem runs the world than that. At the same time, there's the system of reward and punishment. There is also this different system, a completely different system, operating system that's called Leah Imenu. See, whereas Rachel is about symmetry and things fitting in the box and making sense, reward and punishment, Leah Imenu is described as Eni Leah Rakus. The eyes of Leah were dull. The eyes of Leah is not described as an attractive woman. In fact, the Shadchanim at the time thought that she was a proper shidduch with Esav. So what's Leah? See, it's interesting, the child of Leah Imenu, right? Let's think about this for a second. Yosef versus Yehuda, right? Yosef, we have a nickname for Yosef. What's Yosef's nickname? Yosef is Yosef ha-Tzadik. What's a Tzadik? A Tzadik is someone whose relationship with Hashem is very much reward and punishment based, right? And the Tzaddik is someone that's able to live up to that standard. And the Tzaddik governs his life, every decision he makes, it's in terms of, is this on the side of reward, or is this on the side of punishment? And Yosef is handsome, Yosef is beautiful. Not only is he physically attractive, but spiritually he's symmetrical, everything fits. That's Yosef Tzaddik. The world of Yosef Tzaddik, the world of Rachel Imenu, is that world of living with Hashem in that way of reward and punishment. But then you have Yehuda, right? What's Yehuda? Yehuda, the world of Yehuda and his descendants, all sorts of strange things happen in Yehuda, right? Yehuda, was walking down the street, sees this woman, Tamar, right? Thinks that she's a prostitute, and he's crossing the street. He wants to go the other way, like any from Jew would do. And Chazal say that a malach came and just like pushed him back, to get him to Tamar. Strange things happen. The union of Yehuda and Tamar gives birth eventually to Mashiach. Right? David HaMelech, who's the great-grandson of Leah, right? David HaMelech comes from Rus. Where does Rus come from? Lot and his two daughters. In the world of, is that beautiful? in the world of Rachel Imenu, in the world of Yosef HaTzadik, all that stuff doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense how Mashiach Tzidkenu himself, the greatest Jew of all time, the redemption of the universe, should come out of Lot and his two daughters. Should come out of Yehuda and Tamar being together, a father-in-law and a son-in-law. Very, very strange things. What is Leah? Leah means that at the same time there's a system of reward and punishment. There's another system by which Hashem runs the world, which is a system that the Ramchal calls Hanhagas HaYichud. A way that there are things that happen in life that don't fit the classic box of reward and punishment. There are people that deserve good things and don't seem to get it in this world. And there are people that deserve bad things and don't seem to get it in this world either. And the system of Rachel doesn't make any sense. But there's such a thing called Leah. And Leah is a way of divine providence where the Rebbeinu Shalom is working stuff out. And things have to be worked out. In other words, so for example, you could have a neshama, let's just give an example. You could have a neshama that, for whatever reason, its specific lot in life, in terms of Leah, in terms of the big picture that things have to be worked out. Since, let me give you an example, to pull back for a second. Adam and Chava sinned, right? Ever since Adam and Chava sinned, it's the responsibility of every single Jewish soul to do its part in fixing that mistake. And dependent on where your neshama was, in that big person called Adam Harishon, depending on where your neshama was in that body and your involvement in that sin, that will define your situation in life that you have to go through. So you could have a particular neshama, give an example. That's called Le'imenu. You could have a particular neshama that in terms of the big picture, the world has to get to Mashiach, no matter what. The big picture of fixing Adam and Chava. You could have a neshama that its lot in life is to struggle with health. The person is going to be not so healthy. That's its lot in life. That's the way that's its deal. That's its deal. And then it comes to the world, and maybe the guy's a tzaddik, right? And maybe in terms of reward and punishment, he deserves to be very healthy. So then you have a conflict between Rachel and Leah. You have a conflict. On the one hand, you have this guy that in terms of reward and punishment, in terms of that system of Rachel, he deserves to be healthy. Mitzat Sheni, on the other hand, in the world of Leah Imenu, the big picture that God has to take care of stuff that's beyond our understanding, this guy needs to have the flu. What am I supposed to do? So there's a conflict there. So what does Rebbeinu Shalom do in such cases? So I'll tell you an amazing thing from the Ramchal. The Ramchal said that the general approach in world history, whenever Hashem was in a situation where there was a conflict about what this guy should get. Should this guy get what he deserves in terms of his actions right now? Or should this guy experience a situation in life that's coming from a much deeper place that doesn't make sense according to his specific actions? Rachel or Leah, which one? The Rachel says that usually throughout Jewish history, the more dominant system, the overriding system, was Rachel. That's just the reality. And the Rachel says that, and it's not because God is not paying attention, and it's not because things are random. It's because bigger things are being worked out, and there is this this system that every neshama has to go through in terms of its place in the bigger universe, to bring the world that much closer to Mashiach. That's not necessarily dependent on what you actually deserve that day, in terms of your actions. And no, certainly after 120, a person gets paid back everything according to what we deserve. But in terms of what happens to us in this world as we get closer and closer to Mashiach, very often it doesn't line up with what we think we deserve in terms of reward and punishment. And the Rachel says that therefore you're going to have Jews before Mashiach comes that are going to be very, they're going to question like what's going on in my life. I'm doing everything right, and it doesn't seem to work, And Rachel says, and they're going to be told by other people, well, it just must be that you're just a bad guy. You just don't know it. You know what I mean? It's like, look at the book of Eov, right? What's the book of Eov about? The book of Eov is that Eov is a tzaddik. Eov is a good guy. He does everything right. And he has a good life and everything's fine. And then all of a sudden, Marish, one day, everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. His family, God forbid, they die. His parents, everything falls apart. And, he doesn't know what to do. I didn't do anything wrong. So all of his friends, that's the book of Eov, all his friends come to give him some encouragement, whatever. And the basic theme of his friends are that, well, it must be you are a bad guy. It must be you are a bad guy because God doesn't do things randomly. And if God's punishing you, it's because you deserve punishment. You think you're a tzaddik? Well, it must be you're not. And Eov keeps on responding to them. I'm telling you, I'm really a good guy. I'm telling you, I really didn't do anything wrong in my life. I don't deserve this. And his friends keep on saying, well, you must. You must. Until Hashem himself comes to Eov at the end of the book and says to him, your friends are wrong. You're right. You are a tzaddik. And you don't deserve this in terms of your actions. But Hashem says it in one line, which is, Eifa hayista b'yastir, where were you when I first created the universe? And that's what Hashem is telling Eov is that, for whatever reason, I've decided that right now in your life, the system by which I'm running your life is not Rachel. It's not Rachel. It's not reward and punishment. In terms of reward and punishment, you don't deserve this. But I've decided, because of where your neshama comes from and because of big picture stuff, that I have to run your life now in the world of Leah. And in terms of Leah, it doesn't make sense to you, but this is stuff that you have to go. And the Rachel said, handpicked to live a life through the system of Leah and to go through stuff that they don't otherwise deserve because of their actions, but things that they have to go through for the bigger picture stuff, things that are beyond their understanding. The Ramchal says that those Jews, ultimately, when Mashiach does come, they are going to be the head of the head of the line, because the stuff that they've gone through was for the sake of the world, for the sake of Klal Yisrael, for the sake of something much bigger, and that itself is going to be their claim to fame when Mashiach does come. And we have to know that before Hashem brought us down to this world, Hashem makes this choice, and Hashem tells us this, and Hashem says to us that before you come down, you should know that because we're so close to Mashiach, your life is going to be run with Leah. Your life is going to be run with Leah. And we accepted that, you know what I mean? And we come down to the world, and that's what we have to deal with. Now, ultimately, Rachel and Leah are two sisters, and the systems have to be integrated. But it's very difficult how Rachel and Leah how to make them get along. Yosef and Yehuda didn't get along too much. And it's very, very difficult to know. But it's very, very important, especially for our generation, to realize this truth, is that these are two systems that Hashem runs the world with. And not always is the answer simply, well, it's because because you did an Aveira the other day, or because you did a mitzvah the other day, whatever. Rachel is not always the answer. Sometimes it's Leah. And the truth is that although Yaakov Avinu wanted to marry, which one did he want to marry initially, right? He wanted to marry Rachel, right? Because that's the beautiful system. That's the system that makes sense, that everything fits into a box. That's what you would want. But it turns out not only did he first marry Leah, but who's he buried with? The Sfarim say that where a person's buried, That's more of an indicator in terms of like depth, the deepest part of who you are. Which wife is he buried with? He's buried with Leah. He's buried with Leah. Because even though there's a part of us that would love to relate to Hashem in a way that it makes sense to us, but there's a much deeper relationship that's forged with Hashem when we're able to acknowledge that He's running our lives in a way that doesn't make sense. That's a deeper relationship. You know what I mean? Like, let's say in books and movies, sometimes if you have a character that's like a two-dimensional character, that's not a good character, right? That doesn't draw people. You're not going to watch that movie twice if there's no character development, right? Such a thing, right? So sometimes, God forbid, sometimes we look at God as having like being a two-dimensional character. Like there's no character development. We're good, He gives us good things. We're bad things. Like there's no, like that's not complicated. You know what I mean? But having a deeper relationship with Hashem demands us to see Him as complicated. The complexity of how Hashem runs our lives, that's Leah. Rachel is the simple one. Rachel is the thing that makes sense. Leah is complicated. And when we accept that, that's actually the beginning of building a much deeper relationship with Hashem. So Leah, there's great depth to that. That's why, in every bracha that we say, for example, you make a shahakal, right? Make a shahakal. How does the bracha, what's the formula of every bracha? The formula of every bracha is, Baruch Ato Hashem, blessed are you Hashem. You're talking, second person, you. Okay, so Hashem's in front of me. I'm talking to Him. And then how does the bracha end off? Sha'akol niya b'dvar, that everything was created by His words. So He's not like, it starts off second person, ends up in third. So what happened? Hashem went away? The answer is every bracha is establishing, the formula of a bracha is establishing our relationship with Hashem. And that relationship is multifaceted. The relationship begins initially with like Rachel. And that way of looking at Hashem as everything makes sense, that's Baruch Ata, you. In other words, that's a part of God that makes sense to me. That's not beyond my scope, that makes sense. But that's not the end of the relationship, that's the beginning. The deepest part of the relationship is when it ends off as, I don't get Him at all. Shahakol niyab devara, He's way beyond me. He's not a two-dimensional character, there's real depth there. That shouldn't scare us away. That's an opportunity for a real deep relationship. It's a very, very important point. That very often people, when a person is confronted with questions and situations that don't make sense in terms of what they think they deserve, there's a choice there. Either you can use that challenge as as an opportunity to just run away, run away. Or you can use that as an opportunity to realize that God is much deeper than you ever thought. And that same God that you're still talking to, you realize how far beyond He is from your comprehension. And that can deepen your relationship. It can deepen your relationship. Instead of God is more complex than you ever thought. And that makes, and now that and you still have the opportunity to talk to Him and to relate to Him, that's a much more profound experience. It's a much more profound relationship. It's deeper. It's more mature. It's not childlike. It's an adult relationship. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. Rabban Hashem should help. And we should be zeicha to come to that time of when Mashiach comes. We're promised that these two worlds of Rachel and Leah will be reunited. And what that means is that Hashem is going to replay our lives, and every single part of our lives that didn't make any sense, that was all Leah, not Rachel, Hashem will eventually show back the recording and show how everything does make sense on some level, and things will eventually be brought back together, and Leah will be shown to be as beautiful as Rachel, and Rachel will be shown to be as deep as Leah. And we should be zeicha to experience that. But until that happens, we have to be strong in our emunah, and to take the challenges that confront us as not to see them as challenges like that, or stumbling blocks, or walls in our way, but to use them as opportunities to deepen our appreciation of how deep Hashem is, and how profound the system that He's running the world is. Thank you.
Hashem, thank you, Hashem, thank